Your elected moderator, Peter May, is not in Putney. He's across the seas, and I'm your appointed moderator for today. So welcome to you. In general, we'll be following Robert's Rules of Order. There are a couple of places where state law or town tradition differs from Robert's Rules of Order. I'm going to briefly tell you them so that you'll know. We accept amendments, and we accept amendments to amendments, but we do not accept amendments to amendments to amendments. We don't accept so-called tertiary amendments. If you have comments or if there is discussion or debate, please remember to address your comments to your moderator rather than to each other across the floor. It adds a measure of decorum to the meeting, and most of the time that doesn't matter, but if things get a little warmer, it's a way of encouraging good manners, besides which your moderator enjoys being addressed. Please use a zip code. All articles must be moved and seconded, and then they become the property of the Assembly. But until they are moved and seconded, we cannot act on them. The only piece about that to remember is a unique Vermont tradition called passing over. If you want to ask the Assembly not even to consider a motion, you can ask that it be passed over, in which case you have to do that before the article is moved. Once the article is moved, then you can either defeat the article or you can also make a motion to postpone it indefinitely. Articles that appear in your warning. Does everybody have a warning? Excuse me. So your warning is the last page of your town meeting. Articles that are put to you by Australian ballot cannot be discussed in this assembly because that is electioneering within too many feet of the polls. So we will just read them and then we will move on to the next item for the items that are by Australian ballot. Anytime there is an effort to quell debate, it requires a 2/3 vote. I, in general, encourage people not to quell debate and to let people say their piece. But if my sense is that people have pretty much said what needs to be said, I will ask if you're ready to vote. Articles that are amended, if you want to offer an amendment, feel free to do that. That's part of the process. Amendments need to be germane. They cannot substantively change what the article is about. The last item, I'll tell you two last items. One is that under other business, we can consider anything that you choose to consider. However, we cannot take binding action on any matter that is not warned. That's a tradition respecting democracy and respecting the requirement that people have time to think over what has been put for a vote. And the last item I'll tell you is that if you have a question about my interpretation of a vote, I will pause. I will say the ayes or the nays seem to have it, and then there'll be a pause. If you don't agree with my call, you can call for a division, and we can do a hand count. If it's really, really close and it's really important to you, we can call for a paper ballot, but they're very time-consuming, so we don't encourage them. Okay, we require 7 votes for a paper ballot. That's all, excuse me, that's all the introductory stuff. Ask if you're not sure how to do something. At this point, I'm going to take a pause and invite our state legislators to come up and tell you about their adventures in Montpelier and anything that they might want to call your attention to.
Well, good morning. My name is David Dean, and I want to start by thanking you for the honor of representing your community in the Vermont House. It sounded okay to me before, but this is fine. We're off to an intense start this year at the legislature with a couple of speed bumps in the way, in that we have a new administration and a new legislature, and traditionally about a third of the members of the legislature are new. So we are on a steep learning curve. We also have some big agenda items to work out. Healthcare reform, a large projected budget deficit in 2012, a public record sunshine law, cleaning up Lake Champlain and the Connecticut River, telecommunications to the last mile, and a monster jobs bill that'll be waiting on our desk when we go back next week. I remain as chair of the Fish, Wildlife, and Water Resources Committee, affectionately known as the Wet and Wild Committee. I also serve as the at-large member on the House Rules Committee, elected by my fellow caucus members. Fish, Wildlife, Water Resources Committee has its usual collection of eclectic issues this year. We are concerned about Lake Champlain water quality, especially in light of the EPA decision rescinding approval for the Vermont Cleanup Plan. My committee is determined that despite the bureaucratic nonsense of EPA withdrawing their approval 8 years after they approved the plan, we will move ahead and make the necessary appropriation, law, and regulation decisions to reduce the amount of phosphorus discharged into the lake. One step in that direction is a bill that has now passed the House and on its way to the Senate that will ban the use of non-agricultural fertilizers containing phosphorus and nitrogen. We are working with our forest product landowners to reduce the damage caused by overpopulation of deer in discrete portions of wildlife management areas. The officially designated wildlife management areas seem to be too large to control the numbers of deer to protect the regeneration of seeds, saplings, and young trees in logged areas from deer overbrowsing. The bill passed out of my committee and will establish a pilot hunt program and pull together the best biologists, foresters, landowners, and wildlife managers to try to come up with a permanent solution to this problem. My committee has been holding oversight hearings on the tritium leaks at the Vermont Yankee plant to ensure public health and water quality are protected. Our committee is convinced that public health is being protected, but are at the same time convinced that our groundwater has been contaminated with no end in sight. We will continue our oversight vigilance until the leaks are stopped and the water is clean. And then there is Pete the moose. And the issue is not just about one moose with a name. The action of the 2010 legislature put certain wild animals under the control of a private person. This violated Vermonters' common wisdom that our wild animals are a public trust resource, available to everyone under management by the state. We are working to say in law for the first time in Vermont's history that wild animals are a public trust resource. And then we are trying to work out the disposition of Pete, the moose, because Pete, the governor, has given him a park. We are also trying to work out the disposition of the white-tailed deer herd and other moose trapped within the fence surrounding the Paid for Hunt facility. Lastly, I have introduced legislation that would establish a commission to review, evaluate, and streamline our permitting system. The bill is fashioned after the Gibb Commission. And for those of you who do not know of the Gibb Commission, once that commission finished their work in 1969, they recommended to the legislature a bill that became known as Act 250. It is time again to tap the best and brightest to move environmental protection into the 21st century. Michael has graciously produced our annual meeting newsletter that contains discussions about other issues, and it is available out back. And the Doyle polls are there too if you want to fill one out, and your town clerk has graciously agreed to collect them and send them on to Senator Doyle. With that, I will end and turn the microphone over to Michael.
Can you hear me now? Hopefully we won't have to keep saying that when we're on our cell phones before too long. We are working on that one too. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, for the opportunity to serve you. And especially after this old-fashioned snowy Vermont winter, it's good to be out and be together. Spring is coming though. A few signs of spring. Our legislators are standing here before you at town meeting, and when I woke up and went out the other morning, I had a snoot full of a harbinger of spring with the smell of skunk in the air. Now, I don't want to connect those two things too closely, but they are signs of spring, and it is coming. I can report, piggybacking on what David has said, we've gotten off to a hectic start. Things are very busy up in Montpelier, and I should say, hey Siobhan, there's a greater sense of working together than I've experienced since I've been with the new administration. Peter has set a tone of cooperation, even in these tough times, that I think is really going to hold us in good stead. And I think what I've been hearing on all sides of the aisle and among various stakeholders is that things are working together better than they have in a while. I think we're all on the same page when it comes to understanding that keeping this economic recovery going is essential to anything else we want to do, and there are certain components of that move down the line and affect us here on the ground level too. The first is healthcare reform. There was good news yesterday when the President said that he was ready to move things up in terms of the waivers we need, and this is great because that's one of the big pieces in healthcare reform in Vermont, so we can line up with what the federal government is doing, and I think we can do it. We passed in 2005 healthcare reform. The governor at that time vetoed it. We didn't have enough votes to override it. I think we can do it this time, and I think we can start that long process of creating a single-payer system. It's going to take a while. It's a huge undertaking, but I think we're breaking it down into manageable pieces. And if you want to go online, if you want the nitty-gritty details, there's several pieces that articulate the plan on the legislative website. The most compelling piece, though, is the cost of health care. In 2006, Vermont was spending $3.9 billion on our health services. Next year, we will spend $5.9 billion in health care. That's in 5 years. This is not sustainable. We have to do something. We're hearing from businesses, we're hearing from schools, we're hearing from municipalities, and we're hearing from the people who don't have coverage. So this is an essential piece of making our quality of life better and moving ahead our economy. Broadband access is another thing, and it's not funny anymore when people have to say, "Can you hear me now?" Whether it's for your cell phone or for internet access. We know people need that at home, And I also think we're on the edge of really moving ahead on this. We're inspired because we have a lot more money on the table, and once again we have a governor who's actually bringing people together, who has somebody who's bringing all the stakeholders together. And the plan is we're going to strengthen the current infrastructure, and from that we're going to create a 4G canopy that's going to extend to the last mile. This is the way they do it in Europe. This is the way they do it in third world countries that have better cell phone and internet access than us. And I'm really hopeful that we're actually going to get something done here. I work on the Human Services Committee, and it's an easy segue from the work I do here in Putney. Among the things we're looking at is a bill that's going to increase the access and raise the profile of palliative care. I mention this because in our current medical system, palliative care has a very low profile, and basically what that is attending to the whole person when they're undergoing either a life-threatening or life-changing illness. It's about pain management, but it's about looking at the whole person as well and looking at the whole family. And what we're trying to do is move that forward, first of all, by requiring now physicians to take CEUs, or CMEs, I think it's called, in palliative care. Currently, there is no requirement. And also raising the profile in venues like this. One of the ways we can do that is for us all to start to make those decisions, if you haven't already, about how you would like things to go if you have a life-threatening illness. We've started an advanced directive online directory here in Vermont. In the back, we have some booklets that have the form and an explanation for how to do that. You can have that online. You can have your advanced directive now online, so you don't have to keep it in your back pocket. If there's any situation where that is needed, anywhere there's internet access, which most medical providers have, they can access your advanced directive online. I think this is a helpful piece for us, for our families, and if you want to talk about this more, feel free to get in touch with me. If you want to feel free to get in touch with me about any legislative issue, I hope you do. There's various ways you can do that and get in touch with any of us. First of all, I think my phone number is probably one of the easiest in Putney to remember. It's 387-8787. And operators are standing by now to take your calls. Feel free to give a call. You can also email me when we're up in Montpelier, which we will be through May. Email is a great way to get in touch too, but you can still phone. And my email is on my website, which is now wyndham5.net, and it's also, all of our contact information is on the legislative website. You can Google that easily enough, or it's leg.state.vt.us. I want to thank you again for your kind attention, and thank you again for the opportunity to serve. And now I'm going to hand it over to our esteemed Senator, Jeanette White.
Thanks. Once again, it's been an honor to have you re-elect me and serve you. I'm starting now my 5th term, and it's pretty exciting this year. Oh, just for your information, the extra town reports with the articles just arrived. So for those of you who forgot them, I saw them come in. As Mike said, there is a sense of optimism up there with the new administration, but and it is really a different feeling and a different sense. But at the same time, I've learned that while Peter was my seatmate and we agreed on almost everything, now he's the governor and he is part of the enemy. It's the administration has a different role to fulfill than the legislature, and oftentimes, even though we agree on basic principles and values, how we get there might be different. So while I'm enjoying having him there, I'm a little cautious. We know some of the... I just want to comment first on Pete the Moose. That was, every once in a while, something slips through the legislature at the last minute. And we see it happen in Washington a lot. I don't think we see it happen in Vermont as often. But that did last year. And it slipped through because I think a couple people had an agenda, and it sounds kind of cute. Let's save Pete the Moose. It turned out to be a terrible thing that we did. And David and his committee are trying to rectify that. But oftentimes things do slip through, and unfortunately when there's something that sounds kind of cute, it's easier to slip by. We do know the issues, the huge issues, the budget. We have a $176 million deficit this year, and for the past 2 years we've been cutting anything that seemed reasonable. So to get to this, it really is going to be bone chilling, I guess. What we've been saying is that everything, all expenses and all revenues, are going to be on the table. Nothing is left off. So things will be cut that we don't want to cut. Revenues will be increased that we don't want to increase. I'm going to say just a couple words about the health care bill. The legislature and the administration are working very closely together on this one, and just a couple things about the health care bill as it's moving through. First of all, it's emphasizing curbing costs, because we have to do that, as was pointed out. It does do a couple things. It is a map to single payer. This bill itself is not a single payer bill, but it is a map to getting there, where all Vermonters will have access to essential health care benefit package. The medical decisions will be in the hands of the docs and the patients rather than in the hands of the insurance companies. It removes coverage from employment. Everyone pays in and everyone benefits. And it will remove the issue of what the benefit package is from the political arena by setting up a board that right now we're having an issue with the governor about how that board is set up. He wants all the appointees to come from the administration, and we don't want that. It makes sense that we wouldn't. So some of the lesser known issues that we've been dealing with, I chair government operations again this year, and this year I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and that's a whole different, I've never been in the legal system much before, and the other day we were talking about vacating a condition or something, and I said, vacating, is that like going to Bermuda? But I guess it's not when you're talking about the judiciary system. But we've passed national popular vote, where the President of the United States will be elected by popular vote as opposed to the use of the Electoral College. And it's kind of complicated, but if you have any questions, I'll talk about it later. We are looking at public records and open meetings. I know it doesn't happen here in Putney, but in some towns, select boards and school boards go into executive sessions to do things they shouldn't be doing. They refuse to warn meetings, have meetings held in secret, and actually, no, it doesn't, I knew it didn't happen here, and actually hold meetings by email so that people can't have access to them. So we're clarifying that and going to put more teeth into the open meeting and public records laws. We're looking at justice reinvestment, which is looking at a better way to deal with non-violent misdemeanors rather than sending them to jail. Currently we have, we've been told we have 66 people right now who could come out, and we have about another 400 who are on the verge of just coming out, but there's no programs for them, and so we're spending $55,000 a year to keep them in jail when we could spend less to have them in communities with really supportive programs. We talked about broadband to the last mile, the jobs bill, and of course, Vermont Yankee trying to keep on top of that. So again, I thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a while. Thank you. Oh, do you want to take questions now? It's up to you.
We can go ahead and take a few questions from the floor, but keep them pointed and brief, please.
Junior senator from Wyndham County, that's a tradition that he visited with you all, and I wonder if there's a way to notify him of that. That would be nice for us.
First of all, I have to say that in the Senate, we have 23 towns that we should be at the town meetings for. So I have chosen in the past to visit my town meeting and sometimes Dummerston. And I don't go to other town meetings because I can't get to all 23 of them anyway. And this year, the junior senator is in Norway.
Thank you to all three of you, and thank you very much for your service to us and to the state. So we're going to proceed now to the town school district meeting. I'm going to ask if there is any objection. We have, I think I saw Ron. Is Ron here also? Do you want to come on up? So we have Herv Pelletier, our new principal, and Jim Kane and Ron Staley, our superintendent, who are not residents. So unless there's an objection, I'm going to ask them to join us at the table here. No objection. Thank you very much. I'm going to start by challenging your listening and patience before we get into the substance of the motion. Oh yes. The chairman of your school board has asked for a couple of minutes to just talk to you about events during the year. So I'll turn it over to Benji.
Thank you very much. My name is Benji Craven. I just wanted to talk briefly about our school, what we're doing, and kind of a preamble to the warrants. I would like to introduce Ron Staley, our superintendent, Jim Kane, business manager. Without them, there would be a lot more work around here. They do an excellent job, and we really appreciate it. I also want to introduce Herv Pelletier, who is our new principal, who I have to say, Putney Central has a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot to learn. And you know, not to use a cliche, but he really hit the ground running. Has made an incredibly smooth transition, and we really appreciate everything that he's done. Once again, we have really lucked out on a very able principal. So thank you. Just want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing. I'm sure everyone knows that some changes have happened at the building. Phase 1 of our energy conservation and improvement project is completed. We have an insulated gym with new ventilation, a new heat delivery system. It's not the heater itself, but it's what brings the heat in, and a new vestibule out front there that anyone who has walked through there, it's not heated, but on a sunny day you'll notice that it's quite toasty with that sun warming it up. So we appreciate that. Another piece, Matt Dahl is finishing up a 3-year term. He's been our clerk for 2 years. Anyone who reads the minutes can really appreciate his work. They're very thorough, and he's a longtime educator in the area. And I know I personally have really appreciated his insight into educational issues. It's really helpful to have someone so knowledgeable on the board, and we really appreciate his service. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anne to talk about some pieces.
Hi. The two pieces can you hear me? The two pieces I'd like to talk about are first the endowment, and secondly the pre-kindergarten program. The Endowment Board would like to thank all those who have contributed to the School Endowment Fund, which is now in its 2nd year. Contributors include board members, past and present, local businesses, and community members. When the town report was written, more than $6,000 had been received in contributions. The total is now over $7,000. Last May, the Endowment Board made its first grant, which went to the Putney Central School Community Garden Project which among other things runs a summer garden program for Putney Central students and offers garden plots for community members. The board expects to make another grant this spring, as well as continuing to build its general fund for the future. This year, we also received our first donation in someone's memory. Hattie Reeves Forsythe, who'd been a Central School volunteer as well as a Central School grandparent. If you're interested in learning any more about the fund, there's a table back there by the wall with information, and there are also new endowment cards for sale. Last year we printed a set of 6 with art from the students here at the school, and this year we printed another set. So both sets are available back there on the table. So thank you again, all of you, for your support, and we hope to carry on for the next year. The second thing I'd like to talk with you about is what's been happening this last year around the town, the school, and the board's commitment to early education. In June, the board was told that the Head Start program, which served 3- and 4-year-olds and which had been here at the school for 5 years, would be closing over the summer due to a reduction in federal subsidies to the point that many Putney families could no longer afford to send their children. Now let me back up for a minute and just say that the school in town first began supporting early education 12 years ago, when the school board appointed a committee to research local needs for families and young children. The committee recommended that an early outreach coordinator be hired to work with families and their children. This position continued until 6 years ago, when the Head Start, a federally funded program for 3- and 4-year-olds, was created here at Putney Central. The outreach position was then eventually taken on by the Head Start staff with some local funding. So the school and town support for early education has taken different forms since it began in 1999. Now, this summer, we found ourselves with nothing to offer. What to do? So, of course, a committee was formed with the leadership and support of Mike Moiki to work on the question. This committee included parents, school staff, community members, and a school board representative. The first action was to do a survey of families with 3- and 4-year-olds to learn if there really was a need for a program. 23 families were contacted and asked a series of questions. 14 of the 23 families said they would be interested in sending their children to a pre-K program for 3- and 4-year-olds here at the school if such a program existed. 2 other families also said that they would be interested, but they needed to know more about it. So a total of 16 families out of 23 with young children expressed an interest. The committee then met, talked, worked on the survey results, and eventually found that everyone was in agreement that this was the time to recommend to the school board the creation of a full-day, school year, free pre-kindergarten program taught by a licensed teacher. It would be an integral part of the education offered to all Putney families. The school board considered this proposal and agreed that we should try to plan this for next year. Now, as to the finances. First, let me remind you that this year's proposed budget, with the program included in it, is a negative increase of minus 1.2% over last year's budget. The other good news is that through the work of this committee, we have received a $45,000 grant from the Vermont Community Preschool Collaborative. This is a private organization of Vermont philanthropists dedicated to supporting the establishment of high-quality pre-K programs in the state. Usual grants from this organization are for $20,000 the first year and $10,000 the second. But the organization felt that our 6-page proposal merited the greater funding of $30,000 the first year and $15,000 the second. This grant is, of course, contingent on the town's approval of the project. So to end, why support such a program? There are lots of reasons. But 3 would include research is showing that high-quality early education programs taught by trained professional educators strengthen children's academic and social learning. Secondly, early intervention has potential savings down the road, both for the school system and for society at large. And third, as part of the public school system, this program will be available to all Putney families and therefore a real asset to the community. Thank you.
Okay, well, I was going to do a little piece on the budget, but I'll wait till that article comes up so we can start right away.
But let's get to it. The first article is to choose all town officers required by law to be elected at the annual town meeting. That's by Australian ballot. Article 2, to choose all town school district officers required by law to be elected at the annual school district meeting, also by Australian ballot. Article 3, the Board of School Directors of the Putney Town School District proposes to incur bonded indebtedness for the purpose of making energy conservation improvements, Phase 2 of the Energy Conservation Project, at the elementary school. The estimated total project cost of $480,000. It is estimated that 100% of the project will not be eligible for state school construction aid. Therefore, the 100% of the project that is estimated to be ineligible under the formula shall be built at 100% school district cost. The cost of the portion of construction for which the state construction aid is unavailable is $480,000. The vote on the foregoing article will be by Australian ballot as required by law. The question to be voted upon will be as follows. Quote, shall general obligation bonds or notes of the Putney Town School District in an amount not to exceed $480,000 be issued for the purpose of financing the cost of making certain public improvements, viz. Phase 2 of the Energy Conservation Improvement Project at the elementary school, the estimated cost of such improvements being $480,000, to be paid in part through the application of $40,000 from the district's Capital Improvement Fund, also by Australian ballot. Did I?
440,000, not 480,000 that they're talking about borrowing.
The estimated cost of such improvements being $480,000 to be paid in part through the application of $40,000.
Go back up a little. Second line.
Line 3. The amount not to exceed $440,000. Did I read that as 480? My apologies. In any event, we can't do anything about it today other than vote, so you're all, of course, encouraged to vote. We can't discuss it. Do you want to ask a procedural question? No, we can't discuss it, I'm afraid, at all. However, if somebody in their conversation ends up discussing it, they will discuss it. Article 4. By the way, 2 requests. If you do raise your hand and want to speak from the floor, please do 2 things. 1, wait for a mic, and when you get the mic, hold it right up to your chin. Don't hold it way out here because it won't work. Hold it right up to your chin. We all live in the same town. We share germs. The second request is please identify yourself by name. I know most of your names, but it's sometimes real hard for me to connect name and face in the moment. So just say who you are, and that also helps the record keepers. Article 4, to determine what salaries the town school district will pay its officers and directors. Do I have a motion? Anne?
I move that the Putney Town School District be authorized to issue vouchers for the payments of its officers and directors for the ensuing fiscal year in the amount of $800 each.
Is there a second? We have several seconds. Look up. Jackie. Jackie Walker. Okay. Any discussion of the motion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is passed unanimously. Article 5, to see if the town school district will authorize its school board to accept and expend categorical grants and aid received from the state of Vermont and the United States government and private sources. Do I have a motion? Will somebody please move the article?
I move that the town school district authorize its school board to accept and expend categorical grants and aid received from the state of Vermont and the United States government.
Do I have a second? Many seconds. When you make a motion, let's make this easier for Anita. When you make a motion or a second, please holler out your name. Because Anita's busy looking at her paper and she can't look up. Yes? The motion is now on the floor.
Arthur Westling. I may be wrong, but I think the mover forgot to say and private sources.
It's not on the card.
So will we accept an amendment, please, to include and private sources? Somebody want to make that amendment?
I make that amendment.
Thank you, Art. Second to the amendment? Okay, thank you. Do we have any discussion of the amendment? Are you ready for the amendment? Thank you. All in favor of the amendment to include and private sources in the motion as moved, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. It's passed unanimously. Now the body of the motion. Are you ready for the question? Allowing the school board to accept categorical grants? No discussion? All in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. I don't know why I say thank you, but moves it along. Article 6. To see if the Putney Town School District, pursuant to 24 VSA paragraph 2804, will establish a reserve fund under the control and direction of the school board for the purpose of operating the schools. Will somebody please move the motion? Move the article.
I'll move the motion. I move that the Putney Town School District, pursuant to 24 VSA 2804, will establish a reserve fund under the control and direction of the school board for the purpose of operating the school.
Please remember to say your name when you move a motion. Second to that? Thank you. So the motion is now before you.
I'd like to speak to this. I believe on the table there is a leaflet discussing this, and basically what we're doing is we're codifying a practice that we already do. We have auditing practices are changing next year, and we're basically putting this down. What ends up happening is if we have a surplus at the end of the year, what we do is we will apply some of it to taxes that year, so to defray taxes. We'll take the other part of it for the following year. The whole idea is to try and knock down the peaks and valleys in terms of the tax rate, if we can keep the tax rate as level as possible. So if we had a big surplus one year, we applied all that to taxes, and then we didn't have a surplus the next year or ran a slight deficit, then you'd have a tax rate that would jump up and down more. So the whole point of this is to even it out, and in the pamphlet explains a little bit more on that, but that's basically it in a nutshell.
Any questions or discussion regarding the motion? Are you ready for the question? You seem to be. Will you vote to establish A reserve fund under the control and direction of the school board as moved. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The article is passed unanimously. Article 7. Now that you've done that, we have to put some money into it. To see if the Putney Town School District, pursuant to 24 VSA paragraph 2804, will deposit into the newly established reserve fund the audited, unreserved, undesignated fund balance in the amount of $29,022 for the year ended June 30th, 2010, for the purpose of operating the school. Will somebody please move the article?
I will move the article. I move that the Putney Town School District authorize its Board of School Directors to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,389,277. Oh, whoops. Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. Let's try that again. Okay. I move that Putney Town School District, pursuant to 24 VSA 2804, deposit $29,022.00 into the newly established reserve fund. This amount is the audited, unreserved, undesignated fund balance in excess of $340,000 for the year ended June 30th, 2010. The purpose of the deposit is for future expenses for operating the school.
So it's slightly different, but it's close enough to what you have in front of you that it qualifies as germane. Do I have a second? Thank you.
I'd like to speak to this again. So here's the nuts and bolts of it. So at the end of fiscal year 2010, we had a surplus of $340,000. Now, if you look on your town report on page 41, all the way down at the bottom, you'll see that we already applied $180,000 of that to last year's taxes. We are proposing to offset the 2012 taxes, or for this, I'm sorry, for the 180 already is for this year. The next year for 2012 would be $160,000, and what's left over from that, we're keeping in a balance of $29,000 in case of contingencies. But this is what we do. If we have a surplus, basically we just give it back to the taxpayers. So this is basically the numbers for what I just discussed on a snapshot for this year.
Any questions or discussions? Are you ready for the question? Oh, sorry.
Leon Cooper. Ben, you lost me.
Okay.
You said 180,000 going to which tax year?
So if you look on the page, $180,000 under the column 2009-2010 budget.
What page?
Page 41. Page 41 down at the bottom. Fund balance. That has already been applied to 2009-2010. And then the 160 is for the 2010-2011. And this would be, and the 29,000 would be leftover, putting it into the fund balance.
I guess the school year ended in June.
Right.
And you're saying part of that money got put into the tax year for...
This is, we can have Jim jump in on this. This is where, the accounting dates and stuff like that.
I mean, because those tax rates had already been set, and I assume money had already been paid, unless it's to defray the delinquent taxes. I mean, I guess I just don't understand.
Jim, you can jump in on this. I think the 180,000 was also projected.
Just to clarify, the total fund balance as of June 30, 2010 was $369,022. The board had applied $180,000 to offset FY11 taxes, 2010-2011, and the proposed is to offset FY12 with $160,000. leaving a balance of $29,022 to go into the new reserve.
I mean, I'm happy to get the money back. I just don't understand. The tax rate had already been set, and that money was already coming in on the pipeline. How does it affect the 2010 tax year?
It did not. I said FY11 and FY12 on the offsets for taxes.
Okay, well, FY10-11, but like I'm saying, those tax rates had been set prior to June 2010. So I don't understand how that money, where it goes and how it actually comes back to the taxpayers.
The $180,000 was in the revenue budget for FY11, the current year, which was approved at the March 2010 town meeting. And it did impact FY11 taxes. That was known last March, that $180,000. And for FY12, we're proposing that $160,000 is applied to that. That'll be in the tax rate mix. The $29,022 is to designate those monies so the board can come back to this body in the future to request the use of those funds. The board doesn't have, they have control as it mentions in the article, but the actual authority for spending is with the voters. They have to get voter approval to expend those funds.
So I think, it's that tricky, year-to-date piece that I think you just need to shift back a year. But all the money adds up to what we have here. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry for taking time on this. It does answer it. It means that the actual allocation, in fact, was made in March. Even though it officially didn't happen until after June. Mm-hmm. So I got it.
Any other discussion of the... Yes, we do. Please remember to speak your name.
I'm Ann Carey, and I'm also slightly confused. We have this reserve fund. A portion of surpluses go into the reserve fund, but the vast majority are being applied to the school budget for the next year, as I understand it. Who makes the decision as to the proportions as to what goes toward reducing the taxes and what goes into the reserve fund? Not what it's spent for, which I believe you answered that question.
This isn't going into the school budget. This is going back to the taxpayers.
Okay. Who determines what portion goes back to the taxpayers and what goes into the reserve fund we just established?
This is working with Jim Kane, deciding what a appropriate level is to balance it out. And the school board makes that decision. And then, on this, you're going to vote for it.
Or not.
Yeah. Okay.
You have another one right up there. You just passed your block.
Hi, I'm John Field. Can you just explain why we have so much $300,000 surplus?
Well, it can be a number of things. Having more tuition students than we had planned for. Like we have budgeted in the past, say, 4 tuition students. We got a lot of Westminster students. That adds to it. Part of it adds to, you plan on expenses, you plan on special education funding, things don't materialize. And, I'd like to think that it's just good fiscal management, frankly. And that's why, in the end, we get that money back. So I hope that answered the question.
Other questions to the school board regarding the article? Are you ready for the question? Article 7. I'm going to read it because it's been a little while. To see if, I don't have the original, the article as moved. Please do.
Okay. I have that one. Okay. I move that Putney Town School District, pursuant to 24 VSA 2804, deposit $29,022.00 into the newly established reserve fund. This amount is the audited, unreserved, undesignated fund balance in excess of $340,000 for the year ended June 30th, 2010. The purpose of the deposit is for future expenses for operating the school.
The motion has been moved, seconded, and discussed. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You've passed it unanimously. The big article, Article 8, to see if the town school district will vote to raise and appropriate an amount of money necessary to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing fiscal year, July 1st, 2011 to June 30th, 2012, and if so, in what amount? Do we have a motion?
Yes, I will move this. I move that the Putney Town School District authorize its Board of School Directors to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,389,277 necessary to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year 2011-2012.
Do I have a second? Will somebody second? Thank you. The article is now on the floor and is in possession of the body.
And I would like to speak to this article. First off, you're going to say, why did these numbers not match with page 41 at the combined total? If you look, since we have the Australian ballot for phase 2 is $23,000, we subtract $23,000 from the bottom combined total, and that's what we come up with, because you guys still need to vote on phase 2. So I'd also like to briefly talk about the budget here. Obviously, we're very pleased to come before you with a negative 1.22% budget. I think what some people might say is, oh my goodness, what did you cut? We didn't cut anything. This is level services. As a matter of fact, if you approve this, we will have a preschool program in this building, which would be a really, really great thing. Why has it dropped? Special education costs is a big number. Same on that page 41. If you look at up at the top, special education, $68,000 difference. The other piece is, and then there's been little bits and pieces here. Early essential education, we've also had a decrease. We didn't put anything in the capital fund because we're talking about expending, to improve the building here, so it didn't make any sense to add money as well to the capital fund. Another piece was the teachers. The teachers agreed to a salary freeze for last year that really helped us out as well, and I appreciate them agreeing to that. And the WSESU assessment is another one that $23,000. We just using the way WSESU assessment works is the services that we use, we pay for, and we're just using less services. So those are sort of the big movers in this budget.
Your budget appears in your report in the 40s. Any questions?
The number, the million, 3 million?
The number is 389,277. Go ahead, and microphone bearers, would you go ahead? Go ahead.
My name is Grino Novakowski. I'm a teacher in many schools, not here. Do the decreases in special education costs indicate simply a change in the demography of who our students are, and it could easily change in years ahead? You end up with, out of your student body, 3 special education students, 1 year, 5 the next. 7 the next, 2 the next. It depends on where people are and where they live. Can you give us some information about that?
Absolutely. We can never project. I mean, we could have 3 kids come in with severe needs, which would dramatically affect the budget. But when we're, this is also, our administrators coming up, looking at kids that we have now, what their needs are, what their projected expenses are, and that's where you come up with that number. We're never going to be able to nail it just right, because this school is fluid. We have kids moving in and out of the school during the school year. You see, Herb can speak to it, but we've had 10 kids, I think, come in the past few months. Things change. All we do is we do the best job that we can, as far as with some good analysis of what we think we're going to spend. And I think with the surplus we've done well. It could take 3 kids and that surplus would be gone. So
I could certainly speak to that if that's okay. Just for a second. A couple of things are factors here as well. One is that we're really working hard at having a more inclusive model of special education here at Putney Central. In other words, we're working to have kids spend more of their time, special ed kids, more of their time in mainstream classes with para support, with special educator support. The other piece, too, is that we've bolstered our EST. The EST stands for Educational Support Team. We meet once a week, and so we're getting those early interventions in as soon as possible so that we can keep kids from progressing too far down the line before we realize that we're going to be incurring extra expense in terms of their educational plan. So those are a couple of big factors as well.
If I could just add as well, I'm not sure if everybody's seen this booklet or pamphlet out on the table from the WSESU, but on the back, we're very pleased that our trend for special ed services, special ed identified students throughout the whole district, the SU, is trending down for the last 3 years. And I think that's related to what Herb was just saying in terms of more inclusionary practices. We've had some pretty detailed special ed reviews from the state of Vermont and from the UVM inclusionary program practices. And they've helped us really think about more intervention at the early stages. I think the preschool program that Ann spoke about is really the way to impact students earlier. So they're not necessarily going to be eligible for special ed services when they get into 3rd and 4th grade. And that's been a benefit that we've seen throughout the SU. But as Benji cautioned, you have some move-ins and unexpected situations, and you can't necessarily control that. But I think we're doing a good job really providing excellent services for all students.
I'd like to also add, once again, that we have the same staffing. This wasn't a cutting of special ed staff, so we still have the same number of teachers here serving the kids.
Other questions? Maggie, in the back. In the back.
Maggie Cassidy. I'd like to thank and commend the board for all of the background work to prepare the proposal for the preschool, and then for bringing the preschool to us as part of an integrated educational program in Putney. In an era when communities, municipalities, and states seem to be cutting education services for the most vulnerable and the youngest, when it's clear that those are the children who need it the very most, and that investment in those youngest children will pay off all along the line. I'm really very proud of our school board and really grateful that you brought us such a cost-effective proposal. Thank you very much.
I'd just like I'd like to point out how much work Ann Fines has put into this. She has been the the spearhead member of the board, and she's put a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we have really appreciated all of her work. A lot of work.
Other questions or discussion about the budget?
Tom Howe. I have a question as to how, if there's a way to speak to how the teachers are holding up to the agreed salary freeze and the inclusive model of mainstreaming more kids.
I think I'd let her take that question.
Sure. I think I would focus on, I guess, that part of that question, Tom, that really has to do with morale and teachers' morale. I'm not a teacher. However, it feels great to come to work here every day, to be honest with you. I think the people are pretty optimistic in spite of some of the national and even state indicators that, support for education is on the downslide. I think that's absolutely not the case here in Putney. And I think that the folks who work here come here with the best of intentions every day, regardless of how much they're making. I don't think that the money really enters into it on a day-to-day basis. Certainly, when contracts come due and you're having those negotiations and conversations, things can be a little bit different. But on the whole, I think that people really enjoy being here. I know I can speak for myself and say that that's absolutely the case for me, and I think that it's been a wonderful year so far, and I hope it continues.
Other questions on the budget? Any comments on the budget? The school district budget, by the way, you do not have the option of line item changes as you do in the select board budget. You can only change totals. Any other discussion about the budget? This is a lot of money, folks.
I just wanted to make maybe one more point, which I think I'm legally allowed to make regarding Phase 2 project, is we did have 2 well-publicized informational meetings, which was the venue in which we are allowed to explain everything. So Phase 3, if this passes, Phase 3 will be next year, and that will be replacing the heating systems. We have an original 1957 boiler. We're not sure what kind it is. There's no plates on it. It's running, but it's done. We need a new heating system. So once again, I will have informational meetings. If Phase 2 passes, that's what I'll be working on. We'll be working on next, during the course of the year, to come up with that. We will publicize informational meetings regarding that. It will once again be an Australian ballot. So I really, I don't know what else I can do besides be on the corner with a clown suit for days on end, screaming at people to come. I'd love for people to come.
So you are urged to come to informational meetings and hearings and special town meetings. More comments? Remember, we cannot discuss Australian ballot articles.
I guess that means I can't talk about what Benji was talking about. But I've been on the Energy Committee, Craig said, and there's a real good plan. It's really logical. And the Phase 3, which is not what we're voting on today, is to look at things like a pellet or a chip boiler. And I just analyzed the cost of, let's say, chips or pellets versus fuel oil, which at the moment is over $3 a gallon for my oil tank. I think Jim gets a much better deal from these suppliers because he buys a lot. But the point is, in Vermont right now, wood heat, pellet or chip, is like 90 cents a gallon oil. And if we've been watching what's going on in the Middle East, it doesn't look like it's going to get a whole lot cheaper in the future. This whole plan that's in place is to reduce the energy load first by the upgrades and installation, Phase 1 being this gym. And once we've got that heat load down, then we can get a much smaller boiler and a fuel source that is stable.
Thank you.
Just comment. I didn't talk about...
No, we didn't talk about that thing we're not going to talk about. Any other questions about the budget in the back? Somebody in the back there.
Jean Giddings, I looked over the financials, just out of curiosity, and I'm confused. We have on page 40, the Putney Town School District Treasurer Financial Report showing the fiscal year 2009-10. And then on 41 and the ensuing pages, sort of a breakdown with a column that includes 2009-10 actual. The numbers don't seem to match up. The revenue shown on the treasurer's report is $3,353,702. The actual revenue shows up as $3,387,359. And the same, there is a discrepancy, not the same discrepancy on the expenditures. Should we be concerned, or is this to be expected?
I'm sorry, so you've got on page 40, you're looking at the Putney Town School District's Treasurer's Financial Report?
Yes.
And you're looking at a subtotal, the subtotal 353?
The subtotal 3,353,702 is the revenue.
Right.
And then when you look at the next page, which has the revenue proposed budget, it shows 2009-10 budget and 2009-10 actual. The actual revenue showing on that page is a different number. And the same is true of the expenditures. It shows the actual on page 41 shows more revenue. The expenditures are slightly lower. Is this just a misprint or different times, or is it something we should wonder about?
Jim, do you want to field that?
Yes. Can you hear me if I sit?
Yeah.
The treasurer's report is cash basis, and the top portion where it's identified as revenue, there are reimbursements within those funds that offset expenses. But that's cash basis. The numbers under actual for revenue and the budget with the actuals for FY10 are based on accrual accounting. They're the actuals for the fiscal year. And what will be included in the future is we'll publish the actual balance sheets annually for each of the funds. And whenever the district has an audit, we'll also include that. But that's why the difference is there.
Thank you. Any other questions about the budget? In the back.
This is not about the Australian.
Please identify yourself.
You don't mind what's on the ballot today, but I'm feeling warmer in this room, and I notice the heat's not cutting on as often, and I'm wondering what has been the change in the cost of fuel, and how are you feeling about this room?
If you look on page 45, you'll see a fuel oil decrease of $4,000. Before we did this, you remember the green monster up in the corner there? That was the ventilation system in there. That was, when it first was put in, it was very quickly boarded up, because when they tried to ventilate it, it would freeze the coils in there. So this gym has not had ventilation the entire time. Now, with this new system that we now have actual air exchange that happens. We have new controls on here that measure CO2. And when the CO2 gets to, the ventilators aren't on in the morning and come off during the day. They run according to what the CO2 levels are. We've had a little bit of tweaking. It's a new system, so we've had a little bit of tweaking. I think we're getting it there. I really appreciate Craig Stead has been doing things like we've got a CO2 monitor here. Anytime we have a new system, it's really important to stay on it and keep an eye on things. He's put data loggers on our boilers, so it's great to have a mechanical engineer say, this is your heat load, but he's working with theory. You say, okay, here's block wall, that is this and that. But the nice thing about these data loggers is, you know what? Doesn't matter what everything says. We know how many BTUs this boiler puts out, and it's running for this many hours. So that tells us really how much we're using. And so with that help, we should be able to fine-tune this. It's a little bit of a process. I'd like it to be faster, but I think we're getting there. So, when we have this many people in a room, we can start heating the gym up. And in this case, what we'll actually have is they'll actually cool the building down, which will really be nice. come those, when we get into fall and we get into spring, when things start really heating up, it's not air conditioning, but bringing in cooler ambient air for much more comfort. And frankly, a better learning environment. The CO2 levels have been too high. The kids, might get a little dopey at the end of the day. So this will keep them fresh.
I've certainly noticed a greatly heightened alertness level on the part of the town meeting members. And Steve Ingram is standing in the back there, and the team that put together Craig, the school board, the school employees, great to finally have this building insulated.
Can I just say, just one quick piece. Craig mentioned the Energy Committee that I formed a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and Craig Stead's a member, Pip Bannister, Scott Henry, Tony Coven, and I think, did I mention, and Daniel Hovis, who have been extremely helpful in coming up with a plan on this. I really appreciate it. Chip Greenberg was the architect on Phase 1, and Steve Ingram was the construction manager, and John Penny, the mechanical engineer. We've got a great team that we're working with here. So keep the ball rolling.
So it sounds like you're ready for the question. When we move to continuous accolades, it usually indicates that you're ready for the question. We can keep applauding. It's great. So will the town school district raise and appropriate a sum of $3,389,277 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing fiscal year? All in favor? Please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? You've passed your school district budget unanimously. And we didn't eliminate
the champagne corks are popping in there right now.
Article 9, to see if the town school district will authorize the school board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes to pay current expenses. Will somebody please move the article?
I will. Melanie Fletcher. I move that the Putney Town School District authorize its Board of School Directors to borrow money in anticipation of taxes.
A second, please, with a name. Call out a name. Are you ready for the question? Is there any discussion? This is a boilerplate article. No discussion? Are you ready for the question? Yes. All in favor of the article as read, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You passed that article unanimously. Oh. There's going to be something, I just know it. Article 10, to transact any other school business that may legally come before the annual school district meeting. We can conduct any business we want that is not binding, but study committees and recommendations and so on this is the place to bring them up without reference, of course, to Australian ballot issues. In the back, we have...
Ron has a piece.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ron. Sure. I can't see that. Oh, please do. This is always fun.
I just have a couple of special presentations, and I want to say that I think we're so fortunate to have a board of directors that's so committed to the children in the town of Putney. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge one of our members that is leaving the board in recognition and appreciation of your dedication to the students and families of the Putney Town School District during 3 years of service on the Board of School Directors, to Matt Dahl. And the Vermont School Board Association presents Years of Service Awards to board members, and this board member has served 12 years on the Putney Central School Board, and in recognition of dedication and exemplary service to the Vermont children as a board member of the Putney School Board, to Ann Fines.
Now in the back.
Eva Munden. I see we're moving along really fast, and I know we're going to have a wonderful lunch. But looking at this, and I'm realizing that for a while there, we didn't have someone running for school board. This year there was an empty slot. There are 2 empty slots, but for a while, and that a gentleman here, who's here today, stepped forward to do that. I'm wondering if I might ask the school board, if each one of you, we've got time, be willing to talk a little bit about why you serve and what caused you to serve, so that we can wake up in our community here a greater desire to do what you've been doing for us. So I'm wondering if people are willing to have that happen. Is that okay?
There's some enthusiasm for that, but I will encourage you to make very brief statements, just because we never know how long the town portion will take. But please, speak to some recruiting, if you...
Well, recruiting, how it's fed you, being on this board, and how often you meet, and the joy of the work. Because in a number of town offices, jobs for the town, so many people have served, and also there's so many empty slots.
There are a lot of vacancies.
A lot of vacancies, and it's tragic for a town that has transitioned Putney and is so enthusiastic about things like that, and don't realize that the bones of a town, or people like yourselves up there, and basic serving on committees. Thank you.
Well, in my 3 years, I've very much enjoyed learning the process of how the school board works, how decisions are made from an educational and a financial level. And as a parent of a Putney school student, I've been really gratified to see the amount of work that goes into making this a great school. So I've enjoyed my 3 years, and I encourage people to run in the future. It's been a really satisfying experience.
I'd just like to say that I really consider the public school system the foundation of a democratic society. And I think it's really important to support our individual public school. And it's also personally extremely interesting, believe me. The other thing is that this town has a wonderfully positive attitude toward its school. One feels its support when you're on the board, and that really makes a difference. It's a very good job to have, so I recommend it to other people.
Yeah, just to talk about, we meet twice a month, and it's one of those things that, you can put in, those 2 days a month and put input into decision making. It's great. The opportunity is you can put a lot more time into it. It's kind of up to you. So I would just want to second Ann's point of the reason why this is rewarding is that the town backs us up, and we should get hard questions when we come up here with proposing $3 million. We don't take it personally if someone has, a real question. We should have done our homework, and we should be presenting a budget that we feel very comfortable with. So this is the forum when it's time to ask those hard questions. I appreciate it. Sometimes, it's not always comfortable, but that's not what this is about. But it is very rewarding.
Please say your name.
Benji Cragen.
I'm Zoe Parker, and I joined the board because I have 2 kids here at Putney Central, and I've been an educator for 20 years, which is kind of shocking. And it's just been a tremendously interesting learning experience. I mean that genuinely. And Benji really talked me into joining the board, to be honest. But I'm really glad I did, and it's just a nice opportunity to serve. And my schedule is really limited, so there are a lot of things I can't do, like PTO meetings, impossible. So this was one way that, that I could, and it's been really fun.
And I'm purely a parent. I'm Melanie Fletcher. I don't have an educator's point of view, but this experience I've been on for a year, and it's been an incredibly exciting, huge learning curve, and I feel like I haven't gotten quite a handle on it yet, and I feel like I want to put a little bit more time into it so I really understand what it means. But I would also like to say that the group of people on the board right now have been very supportive. I was on the finance committee. I was the representative from our board to the finance committee, and just asked my husband, that's kind of funny that I'm not quite the best budget person. But the group of people here has been incredibly supportive and patient and informative, and it's not a time commitment that's impossible, and it's just been a really great experience.
Thank you. Not only for the school board, but for many positions, this town functions on the basis of citizen participation. So everybody, you, your cousins, anybody you can wrangle into it. There are nonprofit boards, there are town elected positions, there are town appointed positions, and that's what makes the town hum, and this town hums. When I went through the report and looked at how much is going on in this town, it was staggering. So step up. You know, that's really, it's a wonderful thing to be involved in that way. Any other comments?
Hi, I'm Lisa Papazian, and following that, I just wanted to let everyone know, if they don't, that for the last 4 or 5 years we've been doing a candidate information night in January. I say we, but Anita has really been running it. And we try to, get that word out there, but the opportunity is there to come and actually ask people in the positions, elected positions, what they do and how they do it. And you can actually get, if a few people show up, we can all sign a petition and get it all filled out right there on the spot. So it's a really great opportunity to learn more and ask personal questions. So please come and join, look for it in January next year.
Thank you. Other comments? We're looking at the town school district meeting.
Eva Munden, I really want to thank you all as the board, but also I'd like to say that we're a town of schools, so there are 4 private schools in this town, and our tax monies go directly to pay for this school. But indirectly, we benefit from the private schools, which we provide services for. And one way is that, may we remember, that the fire station down there, what John Caldwell likes to call the Putney Hilton, was paid for by those private schools. So to remember that, when we think of, never should we think of us and me and them, or whatever, that kind of thing. So to remember that we are a community of schools, and it's pretty special that Putney School, the Putney Central School, Landmark, Greenwood School, Grammar School, and many people in this room have children who are at the grammar school. Even our principal has a son or daughter, I think, who's there. And we're grateful that we integrate and work together. So just to put in a word for the private schools and what they do for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have now concluded the school district portion of the meeting. What is the lunch schedule?
I was going to speak to that lunch. My wife has been associated with it. This is so there is lunch provided here that has hearty soups, bread, and cheeses, and this is a fundraiser for the Four Winds Project. Nature program, and this is getting the kids, this is a volunteer program. It gets the kids out of the classroom into the woods and the backyard of Putney Central. And if you want to think about how can some of my money go really directly to the school, this is it. I'm also going to give you my quick VPR fundraiser thing. How much would you spend if you went out to dinner? Think about it. So when you're giving your donation, please give generously. It's a very worthwhile project. So that was what I was going
Thank
to
you.
say.
Okay, so it's now 11:30. We're going to, in a moment, we'll break for lunch. We'll reconvene at 12:15 and we'll reconvene promptly.